The story begins at the exact moment Emilia realizes she has ruined everything, or maybe started everything. Paris glows below her, the Eiffel Tower lighting up the entire skyline like a heartbeat. But Emilia is not admiring the view. She's standing on a penthouse balcony in a borrowed dress, holding her phone with shaking hands, reading the message that could end her new Paris career before it even begins. We need to talk. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Sabine. 3 sentences. Well, 2 sentences plus a threat disguised as a polite suggestion. But anyone who had ever worked with Sabine knew this wasn't a talk. This was a funeral. Hers. Emilia's heart began pounding in her throat. A faint ringing pressed against her ears as she reread the message, hoping the letters would rearrange themselves into something less apocalyptic. They did not. Her fingers tightened around her phone. Her stomach sank. Her future flashed before her. Cardboard boxes, a return flight to Chicago, a very awkward conversation with her mother. And the humiliation of explaining to everyone that Paris spit her out like a stale croissant. She tried to breathe, to think, to process. Behind her, the rooftop shimmered with warm laughter and clinking glasses. People mingled in impossibly elegant outfits. Jokes were shared in soft French. The air smelled of citrus cocktails and expensive perfume. Everything was beautiful, magical, and completely at odds with the internal hurricane ripping her apart. Then came another vibration, another message. Sabine, do not be late. Great, perfect. As if she wasn't already fighting for oxygen. Her brain screamed, I am going to be late. I am on the wrong side of Paris, and she definitely shouldn't have come here. But she had, because Paris has a way of bending your plans into shapes you didn't intend. She inhaled shakily. That's when she felt a presence approaching. 2 presences, actually. She turned her head, just enough to see them coming through the glow and movement of the party. Luc, Matisse, both walking toward her, both looking as if they had been carved by someone very talented and very French, both wearing the expression of men who had noticed something was wrong. Luc moved fast, effortlessly weaving between guests with the guarded ease of someone who spent his life in chaotic kitchens. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms dusted with faint flour marks, a detail entirely too attractive for someone Emilia had known for 5 hours. Matisse, on the other hand, moved like a man from a luxury ad, confident, intentional, sharp lines, immaculate suit. His dark hair was perfectly styled, as if he had an exclusive relationship with gravity. They reached her at the same time, like a scene written by an overly romantic screenwriter. Emilia, Matisse said, his voice low, controlled, the kind of tone that could steady a ship. You're pale. Emilia, Luc echoed, stepping closer, gently touching her elbow. What happened? She opened her mouth, ready to say something, anything, but then everything froze. A whisper. Soft, feminine, frightened. Emilia? She turned. It was Elise Marchand, the fashion legend herself, the woman who hadn't smiled in a published photo since 2007. The woman who built an empire out of uncomfortable shoes and unattainable beauty standards. And she looked terrified. Her hands clutched a dress, but not just any dress. A couture masterpiece worth more than Emilia's rent for the next 4 years. And it was ripped. Emilia, Elise breathed. her voice thin. "I need you." Luke and Mathis exchanged looks. The crowd kept dancing. The night kept glittering. And Emilia realized this evening hadn't peaked yet. It was only beginning. Fade out. Cut to title card. To understand how Emilia ended up on a rooftop holding the remains of a couture dress and possibly her career, we need to go back to that morning, 12 hours earlier, when things were simpler. Well, relatively simpler. It began with a lie, not a malicious lie, more like a survival mechanism. Sabine's voice, sharp as espresso. "Emilia, are you prepared for this meeting?" Emilia clutching a half-buttered baguette, hair still wet from her shower, breathless from running down her stairs. "Yes, absolutely, completely calm." She was neither absolute nor complete nor calm. Actually, she was very late. Paris morning était beau, avec soleil, hitting honey-colored stone buildings, except when you were sprinting downhill in heels, dodging pedestrians, and trying to keep your breakfast from flying out of your tote bag. She rushed down Boulevard Haussmann, almost colliding with a woman walking 3 small dogs wearing rhinestone shoes. She whispered a breathless pardon, and the woman replied, "Regardez où vous courez," which Emilia suspected translated loosely to, her phone buzzed. New location, meeting moved. Elise doesn't like the lighting. Of course she didn't. Her brain screamed, "Where?" Then her phone died. Dead. Black. Unhelpful. She stood on the sidewalk, panting, holding a baguette in one hand and hopelessness in the other. She asked for directions. Someone pointed vaguely east, another vaguely west. Someone else took pity and gave her a peach. None of this helped. She ended up walking into a building that looked correct. White columns, polished marble, had accidentally wandered into a film set. Within seconds, a woman with a headset shouted, "Where is my croissant girl?" Emilia froze. People looked at her. Someone shoved a tray of pastries into her hands. Before she could protest, the director yelled, "Places! Quiet on set!" She had no idea what places meant. A man stepped beside her, leaning down with a warm smile. "Luke, you're new," he whispered. "Don't worry, just stand there and look hungry." She blinked. "Why me?" "You look like someone who appreciates food." Then the scene began, and in a moment of stress-induced instinct, or maybe pure stupidity, Emilia ate the hero prop croissant. The director screamed. People ran. She apologized 7 times in 3 languages. Luke laughed. Actually laughed at the chaos swirling around her, like she was the most entertaining show he'd seen all week. He found her later to offer a new croissant and a coffee, and the easiest conversation she'd had since arriving in Paris. That should have been enough for one day. It wasn't. 5 hours later, after surviving Elise Marchand's initial pitch meeting, barely, Emilia ripped the sleeve of her blazer on a metro turnstile and stumbled into a boutique to find a sewing kit. The man behind the counter offered help. Tall, clean-cut blue eyes like corporate steel softened by summer sky. Matisse. He fixed her sleeve while she explained her job, her move to Paris, her chaotic day. He didn't laugh, just listened as if she were fascinating. She asked if he worked nearby. He said yes, in hotels. She assumed he was a concierge. He didn't correct her. When she left, he watched her go with a smile that tugged all the right strings. In a city of predictable charmers, both men felt unexpectedly real, and Paris, sneaky Paris, kept placing them in her path the rest of the day, at a café, on a crosswalk, in a bookstore, Coincidence? Fate? She didn't know. She only knew that every time she saw one of them, her day felt a bit more like the beginning of a movie she wasn't ready to star in. Back to the present. The rooftop pulsed with music and conversation, but Emilia's world shrank to 3 people. Elise Marchand, clutching the ripped dress. Luc, tense and concerned. Matisse, studying Emilia like he could read the storm behind her eyes. "Emilia," Elise whispered urgently, pulling her aside. "The dress for tomorrow's show, it's ruined. I don't trust anyone with repairs. Only you understood my vision this morning." "What? Her? Her?" Luc frowned. "Is everything all right?" Matisse stepped closer. "Emilia, tell me what you need." What she needed was to fix the dress, to save her job, to avoid breaking down, and to stop being the center of attention in the most glamorous room in France. But what she had was a disaster, 2 men, a deadline, and a rising sense that tonight was about to become the most important night of her Paris life. Her phone buzzed again. A calendar alert. Pitch rehearsal starts. Sabine would kill her. Luc gently took her hand. Matisse touched her shoulder. Both waiting. Both expecting. Both looking at her like she mattered. Elise raised the ruined dress. "Emilia, please." The music swelled. The Eiffel Tower sparkled again. The night tightened around her, like the climax of a French movie. And Emilia Carter realized one thing with bone-deep certainty. Tonight, she would pick the wrong choice, or the right one, or something dangerously in between. But she would choose, because Paris demands choices. Messy ones, beautiful ones, career-threatening, heart-throbbing, life-changing ones. And this was her moment. Her first big Parisian disaster, or her first step into the woman she was supposed to become. The rooftop's music softened into a slow lull as people drifted away from the glittering rail and toward the bar. Champagne fizzed. Laughter tinkled like crystal. But for Emilia, the world had narrowed to a pinpoint of panic and possibility. Elise held the torn fabric like a wounded animal. The couture dress, a cascade of silk and hand-sewn crystals, seemed to weep even more in the glow of the fairy lights. The tear wasn't small. It splayed from the waist down and had clearly been cut from the inside. Someone had sabotaged the seam. "It was perfect this morning," Elise whispered, voice trembling, the sort of tremor that made even the most guarded stylist step closer. "I had it fitted at precisely 10:07. I inspected the hand hem at 10:09. It could not tear by accident." Luc's fingers clenched at his side. Mathis's jaw tightened. Emilia felt both of them as solid anchors, pulling at her from opposite directions. But neither could reach far enough to touch the place inside her where panic sat. "Who would do this?" Mathis asked, but he already knew the answer. The city had motives. People in it had jealousies. Someone here, someone with access, someone with spite, had chosen her as the instrument. Someone who wanted to ruin the debut. Elise said flatly, "Someone who wants me looking weak." Her eyes flicked to Emilia. "And you were the only person left with me this afternoon." A chorus of eyes turned to Emilia. The air condensed into a dangerous hush. She felt the world tilt, as if the rooftop had suddenly become a stage and she'd been placed under a spotlight that revealed more than she wanted. It wasn't me, she said, voice small but steady. I wouldn't. Elie's gaze was not unkind, but it was expectant. Then he, help her, fix the couture, save the show, prove she wasn't inept, not a fraud, and not a liability. This was more than a dress. It was a test. It was the line between being seen as a professional and being reduced to a cautionary Instagram clip. Elise's hands shook. Luc stepped forward. We should take it to the atelier. No, Elise said immediately. There's no time. The show is tomorrow. We must repair it now. The seamstress is at home with her husband. I need help. She looked at Emilia, and there was no other choice in her face. Not an order, not yet, an appeal. Emilia's first instinct was to run. She could imagine Sabine's terse message, Sabine's disapproval, the one-word texts that meant career apocalypse. But the second instinct, that quiet stubbornness that had brought her to Paris, pushed back. She was not here to be a prop. She was here to work, to scramble, to prove. Okay, she said, taking the dress. Her hands trembled almost uncontrollably. The fabric whispered through her fingers. Let's go. They found a small, unused service room behind the DJ booth, a place with a table, a single lamp, and mercifully a sewing kit. Luc cleared a space, Mathis held the lamp, and Elise sat down in an antique chair, with the look of someone about to unpeel their heart. Emilia spread the dress across the table, analyzing the damage. The cut had been made with precision, not random, not accidental. This was deliberate. The stitches around the seam looked fresh. Someone had slipped their hand inside and sliced the thread, then replaced it with a neat, almost invisible running stitch that later gave way. Whoever did it knew couture. It's sabotage, Mathis murmured. How? Luc asked. Who would have motive? Elise's jaw tightened. There are always rival houses. There are always jealous students. There are always people who prefer chaos. She looked at Emilia with something that might have been pity. You are an outsider. You were here. You are a symbol now. The wrong kind of notoriety gives people ideas. Emilia's mouth went dry. She understood the logic. She didn't understand why she had been chosen. She had already played the part of the awkward American long enough. She wanted to stop being that punchline. No, she said, with a clarity that surprised her. We'll repair it. We'll make it stronger. And tomorrow, when the model walks, the fabric will glisten like a kingdom. Luc nodded. We could reinforce the seam from the inside and then overlay the crystals. How do we dry clean a dress that expensive in an hour? Elise asked. We don't, Emilia said. We use what's here. The atelier has needle, thread, spare crystals, and she glanced around the service room, spotting a glue gun used by decorators. And we improvise. Luc and Mathis exchanged a look, half exasperation, half approval. Then they set to their tasks. Hours condensed into minutes. Fingers moved with careful urgency. Luc measured. Mathis steadied her as she sewed. Elise watched each stitch like a mother. The DJ kept a low beat outside, oblivious to the couture triage happening behind the scenes. They worked in a tense choreography. Luc heated the glue. Mathis threaded the needle with a steady hand, and Emilia, channeling every YouTube tutorial she'd ever watched at 2 a.m., stitched reinforcement into the inner seam. The task required patience, accuracy, and a certain audacity to mediate between craft and necessity. At one point, the thread snapped. Emilia cursed under her breath, and Luc, without missing a beat, leaned in and tied a microscopic, perfect knot. Mathis's fingers brushed hers in the process. The touch lit something electric along her wrist, an ember of feeling she hadn't invited to glow. But there was no time for romance. There was only fabric, stitches, and the clock beating on the edge of disaster. When they finished, the dress looked whole. To the untrained eye, it would be seamless. Elise tested it carefully and allowed herself a small, almost inaudible sigh. Merci, she said, gratitude thin and sharp. Emilia felt a tiny swell of triumph. They had done something impossible in a room that had been meant only for luxury and laughter. She flexed her fingers, realizing they were stained with thread and glue. Her phone buzzed again. Sabine. The message was 2 words now. Be ready. She exhaled, a breath that tasted of relief and fear. She had saved the dress. She had cheated disaster. But the night had not finished its tests. As they carried the garment out of the service room, the rooftop lights suddenly shifted. Gasps flowed across the terrace. A server had tripped. A tower of champagne toppled, glittering as it fell. And the crowd parted to reveal a camera phone pointed directly at their group. A video had already started streaming. Frames caught the sewing, the cracked glue, Mathis's fingers near Emilia's wrist. Someone outside the service room, perhaps a bored influencer searching for content, had begun to broadcast the urgent, intimate moment. Within minutes, the clip would be amplified, sliced, captioned. The narrative the city loved most, scandal, romance, sabotage, took form in under a heartbeat. The rooftop, previously an oasis, was turning into an arena. Elise, face pale, whispered, "This must not be leaked." Too late. Emilia's phone vibrated, and when she looked down, her screen displayed a notification. Live stream, behind the scenes, the dress repair, 4K, 1.2K viewers watching. The number climbed by the second. Her stomach dropped. This one choice, to help, had rippled into exposure. Her career, her privacy, her ability to manage perception frayed. She felt the first stones of a collapse land around her like hail. The live stream began to trend almost instantly. A clip of Emilia, anonymous at first, sewing a couture seam, gloved fingers trembling, was cut and captioned with headlines that didn't need finesse to go viral. American fixes French dress, embarrassing or heroic. Inside the sabotage, who wants Elise down? Romance or scandal? Hands-on repair sparks rumors. Within an hour, the comments shifted from curious to vicious. Some murmured praise for Emilia's initiative. Others called her a fraud, a stunt, a desperate interloper. Colette's name was not necessary. The whispers would find a scapegoat. Emilia retreated to the corner of the rooftop, phone in hand, watching the commentary flood the feed like cold water. Each new headline was a blow. Each new share cut deeper than fabric. "Are you okay?" Mathis asked, voice close, gentle. He'd been near her the whole time. His eyes betrayed worry rather than accusation. She laughed, a wet, shaky sound. "I thought the hardest part of arriving in Paris was finding an apartment. Turns out it's deciding which public shaming will be assigned to you." He frowned. "You shouldn't blame yourself for someone else's cruelty." "I'm not sure what's worse," she said. "Being targeted because I'm the scapegoat, or being targeted because someone wants to make art out of my misery." Si, Élise Joindième, face bien et faire. We will control this, she announced. Her voix n'était pas seulement autorité, c'était treuil. We will release the footage to the press ourselves. We will frame the narrative. We will say the dress was saved by a team because of quick thinking, not sabotage. This way, we own the story. It was a strategy. It was also a risk. Sabine's text had been terse, and the repetition of it rang through Emilia's head like a metronome. Time. Présentation. Réputation. She swallowed. Do it, she said. If we don't, someone else will write the story. Mathis put his hand on hers, not intrusive, but anchoring. I'll help, he said, if you want me to. Luc's présence était solide et immédiat. I can talk to the people who filmed. I know a few journalists who speak kindly of honest work. We can call them. Together, they pushed forward. They became a unit in public relations triage. Élie's team wrote a statement, eloquent, defiant, protective. They filmed a polished clip showing the cooperative effort to preserve the couture look. The message: the dress faced sabotage. The team triaged. The house endured. But even as they constructed the narrative, the undercurrent of personal consequence remained. The stream's comments were not just about fashion. They contained insinuations. Her relationship with Matisse, the proximity of her hands to Luc's, the way her hair fell when she concentrated. Paris loves a story with human tension. By midnight, the polished clip had been posted. It performed respectably, steering conversation away from salacious speculation and toward admiration. Some articles praised the team's ingenuity. Several of the meaner posts softened. But social media is a hydra. For every head we cut off, 2 others took its place. The live feed excerpts, the short, unsanctioned clips, still made rounds. Emilia, exhausted and adrenaline drunk, staggered into the quiet stairwell behind the rooftop. Away from cameras and the light. Her phone buzzed constantly. Sabine pinging twice, a message from Zoe that read, "How you holding up?" And then, more unexpectedly, a single text from a number she had saved as Mom. "Are you okay?" followed by a heart emoji. She laughed in spite of herself, and then a strange new sensation arrived. Relief mixed with cold recognition. She had chosen to help. Maybe it was reckless, maybe it made her vulnerable, but it also reminded her, painfully and bravely, that she belonged to the world now, not merely as a hopeful tourist, but as an actor in the messy, public procedure of reputation building. Still, the next morning awaited. Sabine's appointment, the stern summons, loomed. She replayed the message again, breath held, searching for some clue of mercy that wasn't there. She didn't sleep much. She sat on her small balcony until dawn, watching Paris inhale and exhale. The city was indifferent and kind in cycles. It gave and it took, but it also offered chances for alchemy, for repair and reinvention. By sunrise, she felt the beginnings of a plan. She had fought panic with work. She had shaped narrative from exposure. She had made allies, but she also had enemies now. Whispers lurking in corners of press rooms, and an undercurrent of people who'd been waiting for a story to pin on her. Knowing this, she realized one more truth. To keep what she had started in Paris, to keep a career, to keep a place at the table, she would have to choose courage over comfort. She would need to speak, to own, to insist. Not only that, but she would need to be prepared for consequences, public and private. She breathed in the cool morning air and typed a message to Sabine. I'll be there. Bring the coffee. Her thumbs hovered before she hit send. She felt the small absurdity of the callous phrase, but it also had grit. It had humor. It projected a steadiness she wasn't sure she felt yet. Then she sent it. The presentation room at Maison L'évêque smelled of lemon oil and polished wood. Sabine sat at the head of the table like a judge in a film noir courtroom. Her expression was a cocktail of professional severity and personal curiosity. Around her, the client team from L'évêque waited, their faces smooth and expectant, unreadable in the dim morning light filtered through Venetian blinds. Emilia walked in with Luc and Mathis flanking her like a practical chivalry squad. Their presence said many things without words: evidence, solidarity, context. Sabine looked at her over the rim of her coffee cup. "You are late," she said bluntly. "Traffic," Emilia replied. It was a small lie. The truth would be stranger. Sabine's lips pinched. "We received calls." "We did." Luc jumped in, steady and eloquent. "We wanted to own the story before it could be spun. There was sabotage, and we repaired it. The team acted quickly to protect the show." Sabine's eyes sharpened. "Is this a PR stunt?" "No." Elise's recorded clip played on the tablet Lucia had placed carefully on the table. The clip was polished, respectful, and edited to highlight solution rather than spectacle. Elise's voice, despite its frailty, carried authority. When crises happen, courage and ingenuity define a house, not the chaos seeded by cowardice. The room shifted. A junior assistant from L'évêque, who had been texting under the table until now, looked up. "You responded professionally," she said. "The clip is already on their site. The community response is mostly supportive." Principal eyes softened. Sabine's expression was more interesting now. Not merely disciplinary, but evaluative. There was a calculation there, a balance of risk and reward. "Emilia," Sabine said finally, her tone careful, "you took initiative under pressure. That is valuable. However, you also allowed a private moment to be public. Explain." Emilia stood. Her heart raced, but she felt oddly steady. Perhaps it was the tiredness that clarifies. Perhaps it was the accumulation of allies around her. Perhaps it was that she had decided to be brave. She inhaled and spoke. "When Elise asked for help, I panicked," she admitted honestly. "I thought, what if this destroys the show? What if this kills her reputation?" But then we took action. We worked. We fixed it. Yes, a clip leaked. Yes, there was speculation. But we controlled the narrative as fast as we could. Sabine considered it, the muscles around her mouth relaxing by a millimeter. "You're not a stunt artist, Emilia. You're not a saboteur. You appear to be a problem solver." Emilia let out a small, disbelieving laugh. Problem solver. She'd never pictured herself in that light. It felt heavy and oddly right. "There is one condition," Sabine continued. "You will not act alone again on client property, ever, and you will consult with the team before releasing anything. You will still own the work, but you will not monopolize the drama." "Understood," Emilia said. They spoke more about content strategy and the digital rollout. Luc and Mathis offered context. Elise provided a stronger statement about the house's history. Sabine pivoted from chastisement to strategy, and by the meeting's end, the tone had shifted from interrogation to collaboration. Outside, news feeds hummed. The team had neutralized the worst of the story. But the footage was still out there, and with it, whispers. Some people would continue to snicker. Some would continue to judge. But many more would see that a small group of people acted when it mattered. They would see teamwork and passion and the messy beauty of people doing their best. On her way out, Sabine caught Emilia's eye. "You did well," she said quietly. No flourish, no praise. But the truth of it landed like a warm hand. Emilia stepped into the sunlight feeling altered. The city felt both kinder and more honest than before. She had walked on a wire, and somehow she'd remained upright. And then something else happened, small, intimate, and entirely unprofessional. Luke stepped up beside her. "There's a small café around the corner," he said. "The owner makes a coffee that should be illegal. Would you like to go?" Mathis stood across the sidewalk, watching, steady, almost patient. Emilia looked at both men. In the span of 2 days, she had accumulated danger, sweetness, and possibility. But she had also learned a truth she hadn't anticipated. Paris did not require her to choose immediately. It required her to steady herself, to respond, to own small failures and big recoveries. She smiled and said to both of them, "Coffee with both of you, please." They both grinned. And together, they stepped into the Paris sun, a trio making new covenant with the city, messy, brave, and a little more real. The meeting ended not with applause, not with disaster, but with something stranger, a quiet, hard-won equilibrium. Sabine closed her notebook with a soft snap, as if locking the crisis inside its pages, and gave her verdict simply. "Do not make me regret this." It was by Sabine's standard a warm embrace. Des clients représentateurs dispertis murmuraient appréciativement entre eux sur le professionnalisme, l'initiative et élégante, surprenant. Les voix descendèrent dans le poli de poli jusqu'à ce que les soft os laissés se relever. Emilia sortit de la salle de salle pour le corridor. Le changement de tension à la sérénité fait que ses jambes mettaient ses coudes avec eux. Congratulations, Luc dit à ce que les portes se fermèrent derrière eux. Son sourire était subtil et chaleureux. Tu as sauvé l'entière maison de scandale. Mathis pliait les bras, penchant sur le mur avec la grâce lisse de quelqu'un qui cache bien ses soucis. Tu n'as pas seulement sauvé la robe. Tu n'as sauvé tout nous. Non. Mais j'aurais dû s'en dire rien. Je ne voulais pas être la personne qui ruine des choses. Luke and Mathis exchanged a quick glance, something unspoken, something protective, before Luke spoke. You aren't, he said softly. Paris tests everyone. Sabotage, gossip, pressure, it's part of the ecosystem, and you handled it. Mathis nodded in agreement, bravely actually. Emilia felt her chest loosen. Compliments were rare in this world. Earned ones were even rarer. But the moment, the warmth of it, was short-lived. Because then, without warning, the elevator chimed. And the doors slid open to reveal a figure whose presence sliced through the atmosphere like a cold gust. Colette. She stepped out dressed immaculately in black and ivory, her silhouette razor-sharp, her gaze colder than the polished marble under her heels. Her eyes went straight to Emilia. A slow, pointed smile curved her lips. Not friendly, not warm, a smile with teeth behind it. Well, Colette purred, stopping just close enough to make it personal. If it isn't our little viral sensation. Luke stiffened. Mathis' jaw tightened. Emilia tried to steady herself. I thought you'd be at the atelier, Luke said curtly. I was, Colette replied, and then I saw something entertaining. She angled her phone so they could glimpse the paused image on her screen, a freeze frame from the live stream. Emilia bent over the couture dress, intensely focused, Mathis leaning close, Luke reaching into frame with thread. It looked intimate, chaotic, scandalous. Colette's voice was soft but lethal. You know, darling, some people work for years in Paris to be known for their talent. Others, she tapped the screen once, prefer shortcuts. Emilia's cheeks burned. The shame returned, sharp, sudden. I didn't leak anything, Emilia said firmly, and I didn't do anything wrong. Oh, I never said you leaked it, Colette shrugged innocently. I just said people are talking. The insinuation hung like smoke in the air. Luc stepped forward. Colette, enough. But Colette ignored him, her gaze fixed on Emilia, like a predator observing a new competitor in its territory. Just remember, she said softly, Paris isn't kind to meteors. They burn bright, and then they disappear. And with that final line, delivered with a sugary smile, she walked away. Her heels echoing like punctuation marks. When she disappeared around the corner, Emilia finally let out the breath she'd been holding. So that's a rival? She asked weakly. Luc let out a low exhale. That's Colette. Mathis rolled his eyes. A talented designer and a professional menace. She thinks you're a threat, Luc added quietly. You should take that as a compliment. I'd rather take it as a warning, Emilia muttered. Matisse chuckled. In Paris, they're the same thing. Later that evening, after a long day of press calls, content scheduling, and exhausting damage control, Emilia found herself back in the little apartment that had started to feel like hers, and yet not entirely hers. The view from her balcony was soft, dreamlike, a wash of dusk purples and pinks, the warm glow of café signs flickering to life below. She leaned onto the railing, letting the air settle her thoughts. Paris et nuit pouvait être lourd, chaotique, au vermement. Yet somehow intime, as if whispering des secrets une seule fois. She didn't expect company, but her door buzzed. She opened it to find Matisse standing there, hands in his pockets, expression a mixture of concern and something else. Can we talk? He asked. She hesitated, then nodded and let him in. They stepped onto the balcony again, the city humming beneath them. Matisse leaned against the railing beside her, leaving just enough space to be polite, but close enough that she felt the warmth of him. He glanced at her softly. You were incredible today, he said. I don't think I said it clearly. Emilia laughed dryly. I also caused a scandal. You solved it, he corrected. You don't get it, do you? You stood in a fire and didn't run. She met his eyes. Maybe because I didn't realize it was fire. Matisse smiled faintly. That's bravery. Or foolishness. Sometimes the line is thin. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city change color. The wind brushed the hair back from Emilia's face. Matisse's eyes followed the movement, lingering before he looked away quickly. I want to ask you something, Matisse said finally. When the camera caught us in that moment, repairing the dress, did that bother you? Emilia blinked. What do you mean? It looked intimate. Her breath caught. The air suddenly felt thicker, heavier. Yes, she said quietly. I noticed. And did it mean something to you? Her heart thumped in her chest. This was a dangerous place, not because it was wrong, but because it felt incredibly right. She forced herself to breathe. Matisse, today was chaos, and I don't know what I'm doing yet. In the job, in the city, in everything. He nodded slowly. taking that in. "I'm not asking you to know," he said softly. "I just want to understand if you felt something too." She swallowed hard. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes," she said, "I did." He closed his eyes for a moment, like that confirmation meant more than he expected. When he opened them, the look he gave her made the city fall away. It was intense, not rushed, not frivolous, but real. Matisse reached out, gently brushing a loose thread still stuck to her wrist from earlier. The touch was feather-light, the gesture intimate. "But," Emilia said quickly, "I can't start something messy. I can't afford it. Not now. Not with everything happening." Mathis nodded again. "Then we go slow," he whispered. "Or we wait. But don't pretend this isn't there." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The silence was full, warm, electric. But before the moment could grow into something else, a phone buzzed. Mathis's. He glanced at the screen. Emilia caught only part of the preview. Urgent. Colette. His expression darkened. I should go," he said reluctantly. "We'll talk tomorrow?" "Yes," she said softly. "Tomorrow." He smiled, a little sad, and left. When the door closed behind him, Emilia leaned back against the balcony wall and finally let herself feel what she'd been trying to avoid all night. She liked him. Maybe too much. And Paris was the worst possible city to fall for someone, because here everything beautiful came with complications. Near midnight, just as Emilia managed to convince herself to sleep, her phone buzzed again, violently, insistently, like an alarm. "Call me now. Emergency." Emilia's stomach flipped. She dialed immediately. Zoe answered on the first ring, voice breathless. "Okay, don't panic, but we have a problem." "I'm already panicking," Emilia said. "Just tell me." Zoe inhaled. "There's a rumor." "Another one?" Emilia groaned. "No," Zoe said quickly. "Worse, a real one. Something leaked from inside Maison Lévesque." Emilia froze. "What leaked?" There was a pause, a terrible one. Zoe's voice came out small, shocked. "A message," she said. An anonymous tip posted on a private fashion forum. It says a new American employee sabotaged the dress herself to create a scandal. Emilia's heartbeat stopped. "What?" she whispered. "It's gaining traction," Zoe said, voice trembling. "People think you staged the sabotage. They think the live stream was part of it." "No, that's insane. Why would I?" "That's not the worst part," Zoe cut in. Emilia's pulse hammered. "I checked the timestamp," Zoe whispered. "The post came from inside the building. Someone inside your workplace. Once you gone." The line fell silent. Paris's lights flickered outside her window. Indifferent to the crisis unfolding in her chest, Emilia felt the familiar collapse rising again, but this time it wasn't panic. It was anger. Real, bright, sharp anger. She was done being the scapegoat, done being the easy target, done being the girl Paris chewed up for breakfast. Her voice, when she spoke again, was steady. "Okay," she said. "If someone wants a war, they picked the wrong American." She ended the call, pulled out a notebook, and started writing. A plan, a list of allies, a list of suspects, a strategy. Tomorrow, she would walk into the office not as someone who survived a scandal, but someone who intended to find the truth. And maybe, just maybe, she'd start to define herself in Paris instead of letting the city define her.